This teenage girl shifts to another town to start a new life. But little does she know the town is full of deadly creatures like vampires and werewolves. Things get even stranger when the girl falls in love with a man who is also a vampire. Becca Crane is an introverted girl who used to live in Phoenix with her mother. But as she reaches her teenage years, her mother gets a new job which keeps her too busy. Becca can't live alone, so she decides to move in with her father, Frank. He lives in a mysterious place called the foggy town of Sporks. As soon as Becca enters the town, she witnesses a vampire attacking a young girl. Becca gets horrified, but fortunately, her father is the chief of police who can protect her from such incidents. Frank loves her a lot, and even kept her room the same way she left it as a kid. However, Becca advises him to accept that she is no more a kid who likes playing with dolls. Frank understands and promises to buy new furniture for her room. But first, Frank wants to introduce her to some people she met as a kid. Her uncle named Bobby and her childhood friend Jacob. Becca greets her uncle delightfully, but he is a rude guy who starts complaining about his miserable life since he got paralyzed. While Frank and Bobby are busy arguing over something, Jacob tries to get along with Becca. She remembers playing with him as a child and wishes they could go to the same school. But unfortunately, Jacob is already studying in a different school. Frank interrupts their conversation to show Becca her welcome gift. It's an old truck that Frank fixed by himself. Becca hops in to take the truck for a ride. She turns back to say goodbye to Jacob, but finds him a little weird. He is behaving like a dog, but calls it the side effects of puberty. Suddenly, he sees a cat and runs after it. The next day, Becca joins the school. The first day isn't easy for anyone, especially for a transfer student in the middle of an academic session. Becca gets bullied throughout the day, and someone even throws eggs on her, which destroys her outfit. Becca bears everything and looks forward to making new friends so she can survive here. On entering the hallway, she meets a weird guy named Derek, who calls himself the eyes and ears of the school. Students can buy anything from him, including drugs and illegal organ transplants. Suddenly, another guy joins them and introduces himself as Rick. He likes Becca and immediately asks if she would like to go to the prom with him. Before Becca can answer, Rick's girlfriend Jennifer reaches there and threatens to kill Becca if she gets near his boyfriend. All four of them sit down to have some lunch. Becca looks around and realizes that all of the students are pretty weird. But a specific group catches her attention. It's the Sullins. They aren't blood-related, but pretty affectionate towards each other. No one knows their origin. Their skin is ice cold and they sleep in a coffin. But Jennifer believes they are just Canadians. One of Sullins is Edward, who is really handsome, and many girls hit on him, but he doesn't respond to anyone. Becca turns back to have a closer look. Edward stares at her too, and they feel an instant connection. Later in the class, Becca gets to sit with Edward, but he clips his nose and wears a protective suit. Becca feels embarrassed and assumes that she must be smelling really bad, but she soon realizes that it was just her tuna sandwich in her bag. Seeing this, Edward takes off his suit and introduces himself. Then he randomly stands up and shows off his jiggling skills. The teacher is equally weird, and instead of biology, he is teaching Vampire Diaries, as it's super trendy these days. After the class, Becca walks to her truck to drive home, but she can't stop looking at Edward. Suddenly, a car nearby loses control and skids towards Becca. Edward rushes to save her and stops the car by using Derek as a shield. The two lovebirds keep staring at each other while poor Derek is crying out with pain. Becca returns home and finds Jacob at the door. He brought flowers and a bunch of balloons for her, which clearly say that Jacob is head over heels in love with her. Becca appreciates his affection and says that any girl will be lucky to have him, but Becca only sees him as a brother. Jacob expected this reaction as he knows that Becca is hanging out with Edward. He advises her to stay away from Edward as he is quite weird. But Jacob is no less weird himself and runs away all of a sudden while a tail is hanging behind him. Meanwhile, a group of 3 vampires are roaming freely in the town and killing several innocent people, including the fisherman. Frank is really worried about these cases and tells Becca to be more careful. However, he doesn't know about the vampires and blames it on the Kardashians who just moved into their town. Frank wants Becca to keep pepper spray in case of an emergency. To train for such incidents, he asks Becca to try using the pepper spray on him. It burns his eyes, but Frank is glad at teaching her daughter some defense tricks. Later that night, Becca goes to sleep while thinking about Edward. She opens her eyes in the middle of the night and finds Edward staring at her. He tells her that she is just having a dream and better close her eyes again. Becca does as said and goes back to sleep. Edward keeps staring at her and is shocked at Becca's awkward sleeping positions. She even starts sleepwalking all of a sudden. Edward puts her back on the bed and leaves the house. When Becca awakes, she starts wondering if it really was a dream. But then she notices Edward's business card he dropped in her room, which proves that he visited her for sure. The next day at school, the prom night is announced. This year's theme will be vampires. Jennifer tells Becca that the prom night is going to be like the festival of St. Salvatore that is held in Italy to celebrate the killing of vampires. The prom night is sponsored by the Sullens, who will rent a whole courtyard and decorate it like the 15th century. Despite this unique theme, Becca is still not interested in attending the party. She notices Edward and calls him out for an important conversation. They walk deep into the woods and find a peaceful spot to talk. Becca tells him that she noticed that Edward has a pale skin, fashionable dressing, and is disgusted by dating, so is he one of the Jonas brothers. Edward gets shocked at her imagination and reveals that he is actually a vampire. Becca doesn't seem to understand what Edward means, so he explains that he is a killer. He is the most dangerous predator and can eat Becca, but his family has sworn to adopt a new way of living. They have controlled their thirst for blood and only eat animals. But Edward is not sure if he will be able to control himself around Becca. She listens to everything carefully and still confesses her love for him. Edward asks her to say what she really wants, so Becca asks him to the prom. Edward agrees and moves closer to kiss Becca, but gets interrupted by a squirrel. After today, Becca is pretty sure of three things. Edward's a vampire. Second, American Idol is much better with Ellen. And third, the next time she sees Edward, she will not hold herself back. As Becca was imagining these things, Edward suddenly appears in her room. Becca wants to try out role-playing and puts on a face mask of Obama. But Edward takes it off to kiss her. Becca gets really excited and wants to go all the way. But Edward accidentally throws her out of the ceiling. Once she comes back, Edward explains that they must take things slow as he is not able to control his powers yet. Becca understands, and Edward promises to protect her at all costs. The next day, Frank gets out to investigate the death of fishermen. He finds some footprints and deduces that it's the deed of the immigrants who crossed the border to get the jobs Americans feel too lazy to do. But his assistant tells Frank to look at the other proof, which clearly says that the murder was done by the vampires. After a few days, Becca finally turns 18 and Edward's family has planned a birthday party for her. She dresses up and gets in the car with Edward. He takes her to his house, which seems like a pretty decent place. Becca is nervous that Edward's family may not accept her, but they all seem quite friendly. Besides being vampires, they all have special powers like Edward's sister Iris has future visions. They tell Becca to feel comfortable as they can control their thirst pretty well, except Jeremiah, who is new in the family. Seeing his scary expressions, Becca decides to leave, but Iris insists on opening the birthday presents. Becca agrees and grabs a present, but while opening it, she gets a paper cut. Blood starts to rush out of her vein, which makes Jeremiah completely get out of control. As Becca moves back to defend herself, she gets a few more injuries and triggers other family members. They all attack Becca, and Edward gets in the way to save her. Suddenly, a delivery boy arrives with the food. Edward throws him in front of his family and runs away with Becca. They stop in the woods and Edward advises Becca to understand that she will never be safe with him. Becca requests Edward to bite her to turn her into a vampire too. But Edward says it's not so cool being a vampire. You always stay healthy, good-looking, with tons of free time. It's just like being George Clooney. Becca realizes that it's their last meeting. Edward advises her not to do anything reckless like dating Chris Brown. Then he leaves her alone in the woods where other vampires can easily attack her. As she says that, the notorious vampire gang reaches there and attacks Becca. Luckily, Edward returns in time and saves her, but she has been bitten by the vampires. Edward immediately sucks out the venom and doesn't let Becca turn into a vampire. Afterwards, he disappears forever. Time passed, but Becca's yearning for Edward never subsided. Everything reminded her of Edward. She could only see his face everywhere and felt like dying without him. She suffers from nightmares, which makes her dad worried. He tells her to try out plastic surgery to look prettier and may get a new boyfriend. Jennifer is also trying to contact Becca for days, so she gets out to meet her. They go to the cinema to watch the Twilight Saga. Jennifer wonders how someone can fall in love with a vampire, as it was shown in the movie, but Becca can totally relate. She walks back to her truck and notices a few bikers surrounding it. They start teasing her, so she walks away, because the more she gets in trouble, the more she will feel the need of Edward. The next day, Becca asks Jacob to teach her how to ride a motorbike. He seems more weird than last time and has long nails and a strange nose, though he still calls it puberty. Becca is again single, so Jacob asks her out, but she completely ignores him. She cuts off the brakes and drives the bike recklessly on the road. She keeps getting thoughts about Edward, who tells her not to kill herself, but she is determined to do that. She even drinks milk, despite being lactose intolerant, and plays the guitar while riding the bike. It gets out of control and she crashes down on the ground. Jacob reaches there immediately and takes off his shirt to cover Becca's wounds. It reveals that Jacob is having changes all over his body. Suddenly, a member of a vampire gang attacks them. Jacob finally evolves into his full form, which is not a werewolf, but a chihuahua. The vampire makes fun of Jacob, but he doesn't know that Jacob has brought his gang. The gang tears off the vampire and kicks his head like a football. The chihuahua rushes to eat the vampire blood and turns into a more handsome and muscular Jacob. He takes Becca home and tells her to forget about Edward. They can start a new life together. Meanwhile, Edward has moved to another town and started dating Lady Gaga to get over his breakup, but he still misses Becca. Suddenly, Iris reaches there to inform about a vision she had about Becca. It's from the moment when Becca tried to kill herself, so Iris assumes that she is dead. Edward calls Frank to confirm, but it is picked up by Jacob, who says that Frank is at a funeral. Edward assumes that it is Becca's funeral, so he decides to kill himself as well. Once he leaves, Iris gets another vision and realizes that Becca is fine. She rushes to Becca's house and asks her help to save Edward. He has planned to trigger a dangerous group of vampires called the Volturi to kill him. Jacob tries to stop them, but he gets distracted by a cat. They drive to the prom, where Edward is going to expose himself under the sun to attract the Volturi. As Edward does that, the sun disappears behind the clouds and the twilight starts followed by an eclipse. The Volturi saw him already and captured him to kill. If Edward wants to live with Becca, he must turn her into a vampire. Becca is okay with that, so Edward does as said. They can finally be together. But their romantic moment is ruined by a fangirl who wants Jacob to be paired with Becca. Fortunately, Edward survives, and the vampire Becca is ready to fight along with him. Life gets as serious as you imagine it, so stop stressing out and just smile.